Hey guys, this is John back for my second tutorial. This tutorial will cover page browsers, and in this specific example what we're going to be doing is taking a single set of controls, in this case a set of TV controls, and sharing that set of controls between two different television sets. So we use a page browser for this, and we use data triggers, which we covered in my last tutorial. So let me start this and we'll go through exactly what's happening here. Basically I have two buttons, a Samsung button and a Sony button, and if you click one or the other, you can see it activates either or. At the same time, when one's activated, it's deactivating the other. So we'll go through that. That's handled by data trigger, which we covered in my last tutorial, but we'll recap that here. This set of controls, you'll notice that if I try to select these individual elements within this panel, I can't select them, and that's because this set of controls is inside a page browser. Okay, and a page browser can be added to your grid through this control here. Okay, and once you have it added, it would link to a set of controls that's actually a separate page. Think of it as like a collection of mini pages of elements that you put together that you want to place somewhere on your layout. So if I go into this folder here, I have a set of controls. They're all in a separate folder called controls, and this specific one is TV control.xaml. And if I double click this, you'll see that this is the same set of controls you'll see on page one. Now, if I click these individual elements, this is where I'm going to be making my changes, applying my media commands, so on and so forth. Any changes you make need to be made on this TV control rather than on the main page. So, if I take this button and I copy and I paste it back in, and I go back to page one, you can see that that change is reflected. So I'm going to go back in here and just get rid of that. Come back. So this page browser, okay, it's within a grid, and it can be placed anywhere on a page just by moving it around, and it moves that whole set of elements that are contained in TV control. So this is really great if you're used to iRule, your former iRule user, and you were used to using drawers that pop out from the side. This is the way you would handle that. You would build a control for that drawer, and then place a page browser on the edges of your design and link that that control to your page browser. So how do you do that? If I click on my page browser, note that I named it My TV Control, and also note that in the common properties, the page I selected is tvcontrol.xaml, which is right here. Okay, so I'm using global cache device here. I have some older TVs that use infrared. I know there are still users in the group that rely on global cache. So why this works is, why are we able to share one set of controls between two TVs? The reason being is if you go into page browser, in common properties you have a device parameter, and right now I set the default to Sony TV, and this name here, Sony TV, refers to this global cache device. You can see it's named Sony TV. Okay, so what we need to do is find a way to change this device property between Sony TV and Samsung TV. And there's a way to do that. Okay, and the reason why we can change this device between the two TVs and not have everything fall apart is because Bill standardized the media commands that control digit 1, digit 2, digit 3, volume up, volume down, so on and so forth. So, you know, if you go into the code sets for Samsung TV and take a look at them, you can see that number 1 is going to be the media command that sends the code for number 1 or digit 1. And if you go into Sony TV, you'll also find that your command or your media command is going to be number 1. They're both the same. So that's why you can share one panel between multiple devices. I mean, I can have 4 TVs in here and switch between them. As long as the names of the media commands all sync up, as they should, when you go through and add these devices to your global cache device, you know, the process automatically handles that for you. And if you're not familiar with that, I know there's a video out there that Bill put together on how to go through that. So I'm assuming you guys know how to handle that already. So that's why I didn't go through it. So let's take a look at exactly how this common device, how I'm switching it between Sony TV and Samsung TV, and that's handled through my buttons here. If you go in, I have an event trigger, okay, and if I go into the collections editor for that, you can see I added a property action, and to do that, you click on a plus sign, you hit property setter, you'll add a property action, and what's happening is in my target name, I'm selecting my TV control. And that's the target name that I named my page browser. Now, the common property on that page browser, I'm setting to device. And the value is Samsung TV. So that's just a value. You're not dealing with device bindings at all. So it's just a value that you type in. And you also have a second property action here. And what this is doing is it's setting the other button, Sony TV button, and that's what this button is named, to is checked false. Because if you have the Samsung button selected, that's what you want to do. You want to uncheck the Sony button. So that's what that is doing. And the Sony button is basically set up the same way. You know, it's just doing the same thing. Only here I'm setting the device to Sony TV, and in this case I'm setting the Samsung TV button, which this button is named to is checked false. So in both of these buttons we have a trigger, and I didn't get into property triggers in the last tutorial that covered triggers. We mostly dealt with data triggers, so we'll go through this just to show you how this works. To add a trigger, it's a property trigger, okay, and you'll end up with this here, and the property, you have different choices: is enabled, is checked, is pressed. So in this case I want is checked. This is a toggle, and when this button is checked, these setters will be applied. Okay, so that's why you have true here. Okay, is checked true. And then in the collection editor for setters, I'm changing the border thickness to 4, and I'm setting the border color to that yellow you see. And in my other video, my previous video on triggers, I was referring to this color as orange. It reads more orange on my screen, but after I posted it up to YouTube, it read more yellow. So it's really a yellow color. So that's where that yellow border is being applied. Set up the same way on the Sony button, basically. Is check true. Setters, border thickness 4, and this is where the color for that border is applied. And just to go through, that's where those yellow borders are getting switched back and forth. And the Samsung button is selected. The field, or the parameter, the common parameter device is being populated with Sony TV, Samsung TV, and that correlates to the global cache device. And when the Sony button is pressed, basically the same thing is happening, only this device, this common device, is being populated with Sony TV. Finally, let's take a look at this TV control once more. So I want to go into the image buttons on this control panel to see what we have set. We have an event trigger and it's set for clicked. Okay, that's because I've been using toggles throughout my tutorials mostly. So in this case, the button type is just set to normal because we're just doing a single click. We're not doing any toggling back and forth. The exception being the volume buttons, which is a repeat. But the event trigger, if we go into the collections editor, we can see I added a data action, and let's take a look at the binding. And the binding is at device.media command. And we're using at device because basically this is going to handle our situation here where we're switching back and forth between two TVs. So at device, the parameter is going to be picked up from what we set in that common device property in the page browser. So this covers both the Sony TV and Samsung TV. The value in this case is direction down, and like I said, Bill standardized a lot of these commands. So I know that there's out on the Google group, there's a device object subject, and if you go into that and you go to the top post, you can see a little documentation on device object media commands. And in this case, we're using global cache, so you can go into the code set if you're using global cache, and once again, basically the command that you're going to be putting in that value field is what I highlighted here. It's what precedes this numeric portion of the code. So that's about it for this tutorial. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, just reach out on the Google Home Remote group. And thanks for your time, guys. Until next time.